make mention of before we get into our Bible class. Brother William is at home with Sister Susie. She is not doing better. Her coughing's better, but her stomach's a little tore up. So he's not going to be here this morning. So we have combined the teen class with the adult class. So that's where we are as far as that goes. Anybody else continue to remember others that are sick? Brother Gene and the ones that we've made mention of often. Let's continue to remember them in our prayers. I didn't see Sister Deidre and Aubrey or Avery. I can't remember. Avery.
Yeah, she's sick.
She's sick. Okay, so remember Avery in our prayers. Okay, one of the little twins. Is there anybody else remember Donna's sister? Right. And cancer? Was it cancer? Yeah. Okay, and I believe Sister Dee Dee, there's a card in the back for Donna's sister. So.
And I put one back there for Susie.
And for Susie as well. So on your way out, if you would, sign those cards for those two ladies. Anybody else that we need to make mention of in our prayer?
Ruth has got home.
Ruth, okay. Remember Sister Ruth in our prayers. I can't think of anybody else. Sister Donna got good news on her test, one of them, and we're glad to hear that. She said the bigger one's coming out this week.
No, 26th of May.
26th of May, okay, so we got about another month of prayer. So I'll remember her in our prayers. Anybody else? Okay, before we get started, Brother Matt, would you lead us in prayer?
Thank you, Lord, for this day. Thank you for this opportunity to get together and hear your word, learn from your word. We pray to keep you in our hearts and minds throughout the week. Pray for those that are on the prayer list, that you be with them. Let's hear them. Pray for your source and teach us to live in these things.
Amen. So we got a couple of options in my desire to figure out about class this morning. I made a few notes. I got a couple of options I was going to do, but if it's all right with y'all, I know Brother William's doing an excellent job, a good job on the book of Ecclesiastes. So what I'd like to do, if it's okay with y'all, is maybe, I think y'all were in chapter 6, going into chapter 6 this week. I believe that's from what I understand. So what I'd like to do, if it's okay with y'all, is look at some things from or chapter 1 through about chapter 5, and just kind of go over some things. Not that Brother William missed anything or nothing like that, but he hit a few things by way of remembrance or refreshing some things that I'm sure he's probably already gone over. To me, one of the book of Ecclesiastes is one of my favorite Old Testament books, along with the books of 1st and 2nd Samuel. I love studying those books. There are numerous lessons to be found in those books, as well as in all of the books of the Old Testament. You know, Paul says that these things that were written before were written for our learning. Okay, and that's why we go to these books, and we learn great things from these books. We're not under the old law, but still there's many principles that we can look at and make our lives better. The book of Ecclesiastes, when you look at Ecclesiastes, who wrote, and I'm not trying to beat a dead horse, but who wrote the book of Ecclesiastes? I'm sure, like I say, Brother William went over this, but who wrote the book?
I say Solomon, but not 100% sure.
Okay. Solomon, most authorities believe that he was the one that wrote the book. When you look at the book of Ecclesiastes, it was written by a man who had everything, okay, as far as fame, fortune, anything the Bible says, Ecclesiastes does, he says in this writing, anything that he wanted, anything that his eye beheld, he could have it, okay. The Queen of Sheba came to see him, and I believe the statement was made by her, the half has not been told, okay. So a very good man, but there were some things in his life, and the book of Ecclesiastes doesn't go in this, but there's things in his life that eventually took his heart away from God, okay? And what was that? Y'all remember studying Solomon? What was it that took his heart away from God?
All the wives he had.
All of his wives, okay? And I always get this reversed. It was either 700 wives and 300 concubines, or 300 wives and 700 concubines. I can't remember which one that was. But either way, he had 1,000 women, and I really don't understand that. Most of us, well, not most, all of us have one, and it's difficult, you know. Not in a bad way. Not in a bad way, yeah. But, you know, and that goes both ways too. So when you look at the book of Ecclesiastes, it is an awesome book, okay? And if you look at the book of Ecclesiastes, you have a beginning in the book of Ecclesiastes. And the whole crux of the book is found in verse number 3. Okay, that's the very beginning. That's what the whole book, I believe, is about. And in Ecclesiastes chapter 1 and verse 3, he says, what profit has a man from all of his labor in which he toils under the sun? And like I say, Brother William, and I'm not going to keep repeating this, but I'm sure he's been through some things that we've talked about. But his whole thought process in the book of Ecclesiastes is a quest. Okay, now, y'all know what a quest is. Okay, you remember a lot, some of you are probably way too young to remember this. You might remember it, Mark, Darrell, and that's all I'm going to mention. But do you remember the movie or the cartoon Johnny Quest? You remember that? That was a long time ago, years. I was just a little boy. Well, Johnny Quest was a cartoon about a young man who went on adventures, okay, and quest in life. Well, that's what this is. It's a quest for finding happiness or finding pleasure, okay, in life. That's what the book is about. And I'm not going to get ahead of Brother William, but if you want to know the conclusion is found later on in the book, and we might hit just a thought on that, okay? So it says, what profit has a man from all of his labor which he does under the sun? I made some notes, and I was going through my Bible. I left them at home, so we'll just go with memory, all right? If you look in the first chapter, he begins his thought process, or he begins his quest by coming to the realization that there's nothing new under the sun, right? And y'all probably already been through this, you know, in the class. But it says in verse number 9, there's nothing new under the sun. That which, verse 9, that which has been is what will be. That which is done is what will be done, and there is nothing new under the sun. Is there anything, verse 10, of which it may be said, see, this is new? And he asks a question. So what would be the answer to that question? What is new under the sun? What is new?
Nothing. Like I said before.
Okay. So you mean these discoveries that man has made over the centuries, those aren't new. Those
Not
aren't
that
new.
person, but generation before discovered, they felt the same feeling of new discovery. That's just the way I take it. Each generation ends up saying, been there, done that, as we get older.
Right. Right.
Each generation does the same thing.
Well, look in chapter 3 and about verse 15. Okay, because I think this kind of goes along with what Solomon is saying. He says, chapter 3, verse 15, that which has already been and what is to be has already been. And God requires an account of what is past. Now, people, like for an example, in the book of Psalms, I believe it is, I can't remember. There have been discoveries that have been made. For example, until recently, several hundred years ago, the world thought that the earth was what? Flat. Okay? And you go so far to the earth and you fall off the edge of the earth. Well, we laugh at that because we see how ridiculous that is, but hundreds of years ago, people really had actually believed that the world was flat. All right? But the Bible is very clear in the book of Job that God told Job, in the book of Job, that, I can't remember the exact passage, but he talks about the roundness of the earth. Okay? That was in the book of Job. All right? So, man may have not known these things that God had known before, but just because man discovers them doesn't mean that they're new. Okay? They've always been. They've always been here. We just haven't discovered. Okay? All right. Excuse me. Any thoughts? Any ideas? All right. Look in chapter 2. And we're not going to read. We're just going to survive. Just look at all of these things. And in chapter 2, he really begins his quest. And we understand that man tries to find happiness in this life, right? We understand that. Jesus says in Matthew 6, verses 19 through 21, he says, lay not up for yourselves treasures on earth, where moth and rust corrupt, where thieves break through and steal, but rather lay up for yourselves treasures in heaven, where neither moth nor rust corrupt, and where thieves break through and steal. For where your treasure is, there will your heart be also. Okay? So, based on what Jesus says in Matthew 6, and what Solomon says in Ecclesiastes chapter 2, is basically the same thing. Okay? Why is it, and I know I'm talking to the choir, so to speak, but why is it that man seeks to lay up treasures here? Why? Give me some reasons why people want to lay up their treasures here. Why?
Maybe a sense of personal accomplishment.
Okay. Personal accomplishment. What else? And let me add this to it. Why do people lay up treasures here versus laying up treasures in heaven? Why? I think that may help with the discussion. Why do people do that?
See it.
Okay. All right. I think that's a good reason. You can touch it. Okay. You can see it. You can feel it. You can use it. Okay. You can enjoy it. Okay. So what else? Why's another reason?
They don't know God.
Okay. They don't know God, man. That's true. We kind of talked about this last week. What else is another reason why?
To have something to leave to the children.
Okay, all right. And Solomon talks about that, okay, in the book. He talks about that. We may get to that in just a few minutes. So I think the reason that most people want to lay up treasures on earth is because they can, going back to what Jason they can touch it. They can see it. They can use it. Okay? Those things, those treasures in heaven, can we see those things? Can I see those treasures that I have in heaven? Can I see them?
It's a totally different thought process. It's spirit, we know it's spiritual with God. That's what He wants us to, as we mature, start thinking more about, because that's what we're going to be.
Okay. But,
Can't see them, but you can imagine them.
okay, all right. How can I imagine those things in heaven? I may not be able to physically see them with my eye because they are spiritual, but can I see them spiritually? Can I? How?
By what He's told us.
Okay, by what the Bible said. Those things that I see spiritually are just as real as those things that I can see physically. Now, I may not be able to touch them and taste them with the five senses, but those things that are real spirit, that I see spiritually, are just as real and just as much there as those things that I see physically and touch. They are. They are. But the key is what? Okay? I may not be able to see them, but I can see them through God's promises. I can see them through God's Word. I can't touch them. But what does it take for me to be able to see them spiritually? What does it take?
Faith.
Faith. Faith. And that's the problem that we have today, maybe in the church and in the world today. People, they don't have enough faith, okay? They don't have enough faith to trust in God, where God says, wait. 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 Patience, endurance, faithfulness. Okay? And the thing about it is these things that we look at, turn over to the book of 2 Corinthians chapter 4. And this kind of goes with it a little bit. 2 Corinthians chapter 4. The latter part of that chapter. And let's look at about verse 16. Now I know it's hard. We got 4 young people in here. Okay, we got Landon, we got Anna, we got Daniel, we got Josh. Rest of us are a little older. Okay, some of us are a little more older than these young people. And it's hard. Okay, it's difficult for them, for these 4 young people, it's difficult for them to see, and this is just a generic statement. It's hard for them to see 30 years down the road. Right?
Because it was for us.
Yes, it was for us.
When we were younger, we thought about the here and now.
Yes. I thought we're going to go with Anna because she's the youngest. Anna thinks about, man, I can't wait till I get 14. I mean, I can't wait till I get 16 and I can, Mom will buy me a car. And, that ain't going to happen. But, I can get my driver's license. Josh, Dan, y'all remember that? Man, I can't wait till I get 16. And, I'm going to get me a car, And you might have been 10 years old when you were thinking like that, Landon. You remember that. Okay? And you thought, man, that's going to take forever to get to that point. Well, look at Daniel now. He's 21, 19, somewhere around in there. He's reached that point. Now, I don't know what his next obstacle in life, but man, I can't wait till I get married. Right? That'll come, maybe, that comes too. But the point that I'm making is, it's hard for young people to understand wait, patience, endurance, okay? But those of us who have older and have already been through it, we understand that it takes such a short time. And I remember, growing up and your parents say, oh, it just seems like yesterday. You ever heard that? Sure you have. Just seems like yesterday. And, time goes by so fast. And they're looking at you like, it's slow as Christmas to get to Christmas. You know the point? So listen to what Paul says in 2 Corinthians chapter 4. Those of us that are older understand this. Verse 16, therefore we do not lose heart, even though our outward man is perishing. Do you understand that? Mark, you're 62, right? No, you're 64. 64.
Don't make me older.
I was going, instead of going backwards, I was going forward. So, you're 61. He'll be retired in a few months. I didn't think it'd ever come. But at 61, you understand what Paul is saying here. Though our outward man is perishing. Mark understands that. Darrell does. I do. A whole lot more than Anna does. Right? We understand that a lot more than she does, because we understand that life is short. Life is quick. Mark's lived at least normally 3/4 of his life, right? He's already lived there. I have. Okay? Darrell has. Okay? So we understand what Paul is saying. Though our outward man is decaying or perishing, the inward man is renewed day by day. For our light affliction, which is but for a moment, is working for us a far more exceeding and eternal weight of glory. Okay? Our light affliction, which is but for a moment. In other words, he's talking about the difficulties and the trials that we go through in life as a Christian. They're for a moment. All right? Now, we may think, well, that's not true, because it seems like I've been going through difficulties for a long time. But Paul says, compared to eternity, the affliction that we have to endure as Christians is just for a moment, compared to eternity, right? That's what he's saying. Is just for a moment, all right? Look at verse 18. While we do not look at the things which are seen, but at the things which are not seen. For the things which are seen are temporal, but the things which are not seen are eternal. That's what Solomon is trying to get the people to see in the book of Ecclesiastes. And he does it by going on a quest. The things that we see are temporal. They're here today, and we're gone tomorrow. That's true. In the realm of the brevity of life. They're here today, and they're gone tomorrow. All right? But the things that are eternal, they last forever. We're going to be there forever. So therefore, when we're picking, and this is what Solomon says, when I'm making a choice about which one I'm going to lay up treasures in, this life or that which is to come, it doesn't make sense to spend 80 years per se laying up treasures here and then being lost eternally in eternity. It doesn't make sense, does it? Because this is temporal. This is temporal here. So he talks in chapter 2. And I want to throw this in, then we'll get into it, because this kind of goes with it. Have you ever wondered, you remember when the children of Israel came out of Egyptian bondage? You remember? And they hadn't even crossed the Red Sea. Remember? And what were they doing? What were they doing? Complaining. They complained the whole time. Okay? Well, here you brought us to this point, and we're going to die. I wish we could go back to Egypt, and we have these melons and these leeks and all these other things. Just let us go back. So then they crossed the Red Sea, all right? And then they journeyed in the wilderness, and God gave them manna, and He gave them quail. Okay, their shoes didn't wear out and all this stuff. Here's a question. Why, and this is, to me, this is a very, very thought-provoking, important question. Why do you think that God did not give them all the blessings that they were going to receive in the land of Canaan? Why did He not give them all of those blessings they were going to receive in the land of Canaan in the wilderness? Why? Why? Think about it.
Because they were thankful for what He did for them already.
Okay, they weren't thankful. Okay, and even when they got there, they rebelled and so on and so forth. But I think there's a reason why. And I think it's pertinent to us today. Why did He not give them the things that they would enjoy in Canaan when they were in the wilderness? Why?
If He did, what would they have to work for?
Exactly. Why would God give them the blessings of Canaan in the wilderness? That would have given them no reason or no purpose to go to the land of Canaan. No reason. Now, what about us today? Why does God not give us the blessings of heaven? No pain, no sickness, no suffering. But how do you know? We all know. No pain, no sickness, no suffering, no trials, no tribulations, no death. None of these things. Why does God not give us those things here? Why?
The Lord said, we want for nothing.
What would be your drive for heaven? There would be no drive. Okay, if we got it all here. So that's why the things in this life are here for just a moment. In this life, okay, it's like going on vacation. Okay, this is what this life is like. You go on vacation, and we'll use one of these battery-operated cars. Okay, if you're a pretty wealthy individual, you can buy one that's very expensive. So you buy you a Tesla. Okay. So you start from Greenwood, you're going to California, and you go down the road in this nice new Tesla, and I don't know that much about them, but you go to a certain point, and what's going to happen? You got to charge your meter, you got to stop. Okay. Oh, it's great. It's great for a few hundred miles. You're having a great time. You're laughing. You're doing all these things. But then what happens when the battery goes low and you got to stop? What happens? Hey, we're going to wait on this thing for 8, 10, however how many hours it takes. You got to rebuke. You got to refuel. All these things. That's the way life is. Okay. We can enjoy the pleasures of sin for a season, for a short time, okay? But then when those pleasures run out, and they do, and they will, when they run out, what you going to have to do? What you going to have to do?
Find something else.
You got to find something else. You got to find something else to take that place, okay? It's like a drug addict, okay? And I know about drugs, not that not that I do drugs, I ain't saying that, but I know guys that work for us, and I dealt with that a lot, okay? And the thing about it is like drugs, when you take the drugs, man, you're good for a period of time, but then after a while, what happens? I mean, you're on a high. We know what that means. But what's going to happen eventually?
You gotta find something else to do.
Yeah, you got to reboot. You got to reboot and restart and you got to find some other way to get high again. And you have that high and it comes down. You have it again, it comes down. That's the way life is. Life's that way. There's always something It's got to take the place of something else, because what I have gets old and I got to find something to make it fresh again.
That's what they said about Elvis Presley.
Yeah.
That, the crowds, between concerts and stuff, that high life, you couldn't get that high feeling unless when you started doing drugs, you was able to do that. And
Yeah.
that's why they say live like a rock star.
Yeah. Yeah. Dee Dee, let me ask you a question. And Pete, same thing. I don't know anybody else. Dee Dee bought her a new car. Okay. Nice new car. And I may be wrong here, but is it as exciting now, Dee Dee, as it was when you first bought
No, it's went down a little.
it? It's gone down a little
I
bit.
finally figured out how to work everything.
Yeah, yeah. And part of the enjoyment was probably trying to figure out how to work everything.
All them buttons.
Yeah, all them buttons you gotta push. Same thing with, and I'm not picking on Peggy, we got a new car a while back, and, oh man, this is not Lord. Let me talk about Lord, okay? Got her a new car, and man, you couldn't wash it and clean it enough. Washed it every day. You go and look inside the car, and boy, they ain't a spot in this car. All right? Well, now, just rake it out. We'll rake it out, now, because the whole car's a mess. We'll just rake it out. I told Peggy, I said, I think I told her that the last day or two ago, I said, Peggy, you really need to wash this car. Yeah, I'll get to it. I'll get to it. Don't worry about it. Don't worry about it.
It is like that with everything they do.
Everything.
Even eating.
Them kids don't help out either, so.
Yeah. Well, in the beginning, it didn't matter about the kids. I'm keeping it that way because it's new.
It lasted a few months.
The thing about it is that's the way life is. We get something new, and it's not long before it gets old. Okay, because the news wore off, and we've got to find something new. Is that right? That's the way life is. Okay, but that's what Solomon says. Solomon says, and we'll finally get to chapter 2. Look at what he did beginning in verse number 3. He says, I searched in my heart how to gratify my flesh. Okay, and that's what it's all about. It's the gratification of the flesh. We're trying to make our flesh happy. And how are you going to make your flesh happy? By getting things that are of the flesh. Okay? So he says, I searched in my heart how to gratify my flesh with wine. Verse 4, great works, houses, vineyard, gardens, 5 orchards, fruit trees, pools, male, female servants, great possessions. Verse 7, of herds, flocks, all that are in Jerusalem. Verse 8, silver, gold, treasures of kings and province, male singers, female singers, the delights of the son of men, musical instruments of all kinds. He mentions a ton of things that he sought to have to make him happy. Okay? Like the world does today. Well, look at his conclusion. Verse 9. So I became great and excelled. Verse 9. I increased or excelled more than all who were before me in Jerusalem. Also my wisdom remained with me. Verse 10. Now get this. Get this. This is not true. Verse 10 is not true of any of y'all or me. It's not true of any of us. He said, whatsoever my eyes desired, I did not keep from them. I did not withhold my heart from any pleasure. For my heart rejoiced in all my labor, and this was my reward for all, or from all my labor. And in other words, I took and I got everything I wanted. Now I want you to imagine, Matt, that all the countries in the world itself, all the countries. No, let's get it to land. In every country in the world, from the United States all over every country. And the presidents, the kings, the rulers of these countries all get together in the world and they say, Landon, anything you want in this world is yours. Anything. And you don't have to pay one dime. You go to Egypt, you go to Brazil, you go to Russia, wherever you go, all you got to do is go get it. Would you be happy? Oh, naturally, yeah, we all would, you know. All right? But, here's a question. Let's say you get cancer. Let's say you get cancer. And the doctors say, man, there's nothing I can do. There's nothing nobody can do. What good is that going to do? That money. What good is that going to do? That's it. That's it. It ain't going to do any good. Then what are you going to start doing? Well, I'm going to die here in a little bit, so I'm going to have to start thinking about what? Eternity. And my soul. I'm going to start thinking about my soul. Because those things are going to only last for a short time. Okay? So he said, whatever my eyes desired, I didn't hold my heart from any pleasure. I rejoice in all my labor. Now look at verse 11. He says, then, and imagine what Solomon was doing. He says, that I looked on all the works that my hands had done, and on the labor in which I had toiled. And in other words, he sat back. Just imagine Solomon looking back, self-satisfied. Look at all these things I've got. Look at all these things I've done. Man, this is great. You know, look at all the blessings that I have. But notice the conclusion that he said. And indeed, what? Indeed, what? Somebody read it. All, not some of it, not 90% of it, not 99% of it, but every bit of it, all of it was vanity and a grasping for the wind, and there was no profit under the sun. He had gained everything his heart desired. And we can't imagine that, but everything he desired, he got it. And when he looked at it and saw it and examined it, it was no good. It didn't what? What did it not do? It brings security. It didn't bring happiness, and it didn't bring joy. It didn't. Okay? So, that's one of the main things I think that we can see in chapter 1 about trying to gain these particular things. I want to hit something kind of correlated with that. Look at verse number 17 in chapter 2. Look at verse 17. I tell you what, let's do. Verse 16. And I mentioned this in the sermon last Sunday, but I want to mention it briefly because it kind of goes with 17. For there is no more remembrance of the wise than of the fool forever, since all that now is will be forgotten in the days to come. And how does a wise man die? As a fool. So what does he mean there? Okay. There's no remembrance of the wise. There's no remembrance of the fool. They're both equal. Well, what does that mean? Well, once you're gone, in a period of time, you're not going to remember. You remember I told you the story about Buddy and baseball? And I tried to help him understand how, things in few generations, things are remembered no more. I said, Buddy, who? Who's Babe Ruth? Mickey Mouse, Joe DiMaggio, you know, Roger Maris. You know who man, Papa, I've never heard of them guys. I know who they are because they lived up my generation. But these two generations, man, he don't even know who they are. So when I live and I die, and I hate to say this, but my mother passed away in January, and I miss her. I mean, just like Dee Dee and the boys, and, you know, y'all miss y'all's family this time. I mean, I miss her. You know, I think about her sometimes, and I get, you know, I get emotional and stuff. But let me ask you a question. In 2 generations, do you think Anna's children are going to remember my mama? No. That's the way life is. We live, we die, and we're forgotten. That's the way life is. That's what Solomon said. Okay? And not only that, but quickly, listen to what he says in verse number 17. Therefore I hated life, because the work which was done under the sun was distressing for me, for all his vanity and grasping for the wind, verse 18. Then I hated all my labor in which I had poured under the sun, because I leave it to a man who will come after me, and who knows whether he'll be a wise man or a foolish man. Now let me ask you a question. All right? Let's say, Matt, that you build this great empire. All right? You build this great empire. All right? And you know, you've worked hard, you've started from the bottom. Let's say you own a company, and you start from the bottom, and you work up, and you labor, you work 15, 20 hours a day, and you put 30 years into this company, all right? After you die, you say, well, I'm going to give that to my son and to other people, my daughters. What do you think is going to happen to it after you die? You don't know. You don't know. Do you think all the labor that you have put into that company, do you think that other people will love and respect what you've done? Will they love it as much as you love it? No, they won't. So therefore, you put your whole life into something. 40 years, you put your life into an effort. And then after you die, you don't know what's going to happen to it, because they may blow it all, and that company may not exist for 20 years, and it's gone. You see the point? See the point Solomon's making? I spent my whole life trying to build something for myself, but after I die, whoever takes over that company, I don't know what they're going to do with it. I don't know if they're going to make it better, worse, or it's just going to fall apart. That's what life is like. Okay? Putting our eggs in the basket of life and holding on to this life when this life is so brief and so short. And all I do is I spend my whole life building up treasures here. And then when I die, and I don't build up treasures, and what have I got? I got nothing. I've got nothing. Okay? Except a lost soul. And that's what Solomon's trying to get people to see. All right? So I want to say this quick, and I'm not trying to take Brother William's thunder. But his quest went from Ecclesiastes chapter 1, verse 3, and he goes all the way through the book for 12 chapters, and he talks about tons of things in life. And when he comes to the end of the book, to the end of the story about life in general and the momentary pleasures of life, he comes to the end of the story. And what's the conclusion that he comes to about life? Okay, yeah. He says, let us hear the conclusion of the whole matter. In other words, from Ecclesiastes chapter 1, verse 3, all the way through Ecclesiastes chapter 12 and verse 13. Here's the conclusion that I've come to. Here's what life's all about. Number one, fear God. Keep His commandments. For this is the whole of man. In other words, that is what life is all about. Fearing God and keep His commandments. And the majority of the world won't realize that until eternity. They won't realize it until eternity. Then, what? Too late. Too late. Luke chapter 15, the story of the rich man and Lazarus is a great story about that. Okay? Then it's too late. That's why he talks about remember now thy Creator in chapter 11. Remember now thy Creator in the days of thy youth, while the evil days come not, with the years drawn nigh, when thou shalt say, I have no pleasure in them. Okay? Because I guarantee you, if the Lord lets you live, you're going to get old. And I tell you, and we'll close. Anna's 14 years old. And I promise you, what Anna thinks is that 14 years old is important, it don't mean nothing to me. It don't mean anything to me. Because the values change in life. Okay? They change. All right, thank y'all.
Open prayer.
Okay, I'll take yours. Oh, that's right.
Yes.